the best thing you can do is ask someone about their faith or ask someone about the questions that you have, because those ultimately open the door that God uses.
Every single individual has a story to tell, and they're great stories that need to be heard.
I want every listener to know they have the ability to change the world.
Welcome to the 1720 Podcast.
What's up, Mount Movers? Welcome back to the 1720 Podcast. Stuart, I'm kind of feeling naked right now, man.
I don't know what you're talking.
Yeah, don't go for the visualization there, but first time without a prep sheet since our very first guest.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll just go Matt Fisher out the box here.
Yeah. Check.
Get that. Yeah.
B13.
Matt Fisher didn't get a prep sheet, and neither does our guest today, Grant Hagen. So, sorry, Grant.
That's okay. I like going off the cuff. It's going to be fun.
We were laughing a little bit because I texted you last night.
I think so.
And I was like, hey, sorry we didn't get a prep sheet. Here's a bunch of stuff we're going to talk about. And then just word wall, like scrolling word wall of like, we'll talk about this and 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 this. And
8:54, so.
Dude, tons of prep.
I feel pretty good.
Second shift text. I was probably in the truck waiting on William to get out of practice or something. It's like, oh, I forgot to work on that thing for Grant.
You did apologize, but then I saw it was pretty long, and I was like, oh, this is good. This is helpful stuff. We'll hopefully get through all of it.
Or not.
Or not.
But you're a pro. How many
script.
did you say you did? 12 of these?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I think only maybe 6 of them made the portal page of Infamousy, so.
There's only been 2 people who have sat down in the chair and been like, oh, I know how this works. Grant and Eric Austin. Because everybody else was like, oh, no, I've never done that.
In the construction space.
Sure. Oh, well, right, like Jake and those guys. But like trying to like, here, and Grant just throws his headphones on, pulls the mic up, is like, all right, let's roll.
You were giving him the spiel like, have you done this before? And you just got a wink out of him like, yeah bro, let's roll the tape.
I did get a wink.
Hard part is my work from home office setup almost looks like a podcast studio, and a couple of people I've joined in a Zoom call. They're like, "Oh, what's your podcast?" And I was like,
1720.
Hey, I love that. Here's one that you guys should tune into.
I'm confident you go full headphones because I've walked past your cube at your prior employer before, completely headphoned up, and just like tap you on the shoulder.
Yeah,
you full mic set and everything.
I had to have a busy light at the office though, because it was like, hey, that was tuned into the Teams chat of like. But then people would come over and be like, "Hey, what's that red mean?" And I'm like, "The red means I'm in a meeting."
Yeah,
What does it mean what does it mean on your computer?
Kev, I've talked about this. I have we're door open policy, right? But I've been having to close my door at the office a little bit just to get some work done. Door closed might as well be open.
Yeah,
because people are like, "Hey, are you busy?" I'm like, I thought my door closed is a universal sign.
I'm suing somebody right now.
Yeah,
it's a busy sign.
I will say the busy light, if you haven't heard of it or seen it, it's actually pretty impressive. Definitely worth a Google and worth an Amazon look, but the at-home solution's a little bit wonky because one, I don't, my office is a little bit detached from the house, and so I was trying to Google around and see like, hey, how can I like make a busy light with the current like home setup that I have? It is actually pretty interesting. There's some, I don't know if you heard of like if this then that. It's like like a thing that you can do like workflows and stuff through. Is like, oh, you can do a Philips Hue light tied to your calendar, and I'm like, man, our house is going to look like a disco party with red lights, green lights, yellow lights. Well, it was pretty impressive though, so it's doable. Ask Stuart if you're interested. He'll help.
I've almost never been more interested in anything in my whole life. I got this moment right now.
I got the old school deal, like a laminated sign that's on a suction cup and a hook. Everybody's office has it.
Yeah.
And if it's hung up, it says, "Please do not disturb busy moving mountains."
Yeah.
And so we have a slogan: respect the sign. Like, don't overuse it. But if you're in a meeting and you don't want to be disturbed, throw it up.
Totally. It's kind of like your dishwasher sign that's like, no one ever recognizes it though. They're like, oh, these are dirty. Or these are clean. I'm going to throw it clean.
Cool sign.
Cool. Yeah. It's like, okay, guys, this is fun idea, but we'll see how it works. I haven't fully implemented it yet, but once we get it going, it'll be interesting.
I'm in love with this idea. Also, Grant, he's underselling how cool his office at home is. Like, built a building, finished it out, like the whole shebang on the side. I've got progress photos.
Yeah.
It looks awesome.
Except I had a guy come by. We're looking at some other stuff at the house, and he's like, hey, did you do a permit for this? And I was like, no, man. And then I was like, hey,
depends on who's asking.
Might be time to leave.
Are you with the city?
Yeah. Yeah. So, but it's been fun.
I think we specifically had permit talk, right? Because I had to shed those in.
Yeah.
if the city's listening, it's definitely in the right spot.
Very much so.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I was like, hey, did you permit?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you did ask me. And I was like, what is that? And then I quickly Googled and was like, definitely need to keep this one under wraps. So
It's cool.
But
go ahead and tell everybody your address right here, sweet. No,
yeah, right. I'm glad I didn't disclose what city I live in either. It's like, there's probably some city folks that tune into y'all. So
Yeah. Man, I think this is the longest interlude we've had before we actually get a kickoff.
Joys of no prep sheet.
Yeah. Dude, we got this. All right, Grant, you know how we kick it off, man. Who's Grant Hagen?
Grant Hagen, man. So born and raised in Iowa, moved down to Dallas about 10 years ago. I started to work for a general contractor here in the Dallas area, interned with them out of school, and then came down full-time back in 2012 and started with them as a project engineer, project manager, worked with them for 10 years and was a ton of fun, and recently transitioning over to the software side of the construction industry. So really excited about what that's going to entail, and I've just really enjoyed all things relationships that the construction industry's privileged me with in my career and also our family, and have just really enjoyed what the new season is going to look like. So it's going to be really fun, new adventures, and ultimately it's all been people-based, which is so cool to look back and see, and many of which are obviously listeners for you guys, which has been fun, and our relationships that we got to grow along the way too.
I mean, that is, if you had to pull a few like threads through all the themes of our episodes, people is one of them, right? This is the space we live in. Do you remember the first time you met Grant Hagen, Kev? I do.
I think it was SMU before YCC.
Yeah.
We were in the YCC, and that's where the relationship went further.
Mm-hmm.
Did y'all come in at the same time? Like plus
Plus or minus 2 years. I was 2010. You were 2012, and you must have went straight to the SMU project.
Yep.
So that's it was on SMU because we record here in the Tech's office. We were in the conference center across the way doing a presentation about the technology that you guys had deployed on site, and whatever was that, like 2012, I guess it was. When was that
it would have
project?
been like 2013, 2014 time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were talking about how y'all are generally like replacing like sheets and stuff with, y'all had, at the time, I think they were huge 42-inch TVs or something. I don't know.
Whoa.
Yeah. But like all of these like very technologically advanced solutions that were being deployed on that project. And I was like, that's amazing. It's just,
And that was a YCC meeting that you were presenting at?
Yeah.
Because I remember that on the drive here, I was thinking in my head, like, I remember that event, not from what was being said on the technology, just like your presentation skills. Both of you guys.
Same. Remember,
I was
me
like,
too.
dude, this guy's solid. I would be like shaking up there, and he's talking about, you're like OG of drone, like before it was mainstream and stuff.
You are OG of drone, bro.
You guys can't see my blushing over here, but no, it's fun. What's really crazy is like the technology side of it. I had no idea coming into the industry that I would love that part of it as much. I mean, a lot of the internships and things I had coming into the industry were all project management based and different, types of jobs and market sectors and things like that. But yeah, when you're fully in on a job, you just see so many inefficiencies and opportunities to improve. And man, kudos to the company I was at. Like they really gave me opportunities to try different things. And it wasn't just the company, it was the people. I look back and think of the people that were on that job and still have some incredible relationships with. And, they're the ones that trust you to the point of like, hey, that actually isn't a crazy idea. And let's try it. Let's see if it works. And some stuff did, some stuff didn't. A lot of things along the way. But that was fun. And it's cool too because, you guys obviously get to see Dallas, Fort Worth, and just the market that's here. The industry is so collaborative here. It's just cool that when you get to go present, like it's very receptive. People are really interested, and it's not something that like has a huge competitive advantage at a lot of companies. And so I think that definitely lended itself to be able to share it with a lot of people and say, hey, like, let's do this together. Like, let's think of opportunities to have this thing grow into ways that we didn't even think individually, but if we do it together, hey, what could we possibly do? So it was fun.
I'm gonna pull you back to like being a kid and growing up and your parents and all that stuff in a second, but I want to linger on that because you said OG of drones, but y'all had drones deployed on SMU, right?
Yeah,
y'all were doing roof inspections.
Yeah.
It
was really crazy. So what was really funny, there was just this, total God thing of just timing of a lot of stuff of how it all kind of like came together, but. We were nearing the end of that job at SMU and just beautiful campus, buildings, just materials, all that stuff. And that job was unique because it had this really unique slate roof.
Yeah.
And SMU has just some really big design standards that made it really challenging to go up and inspect it and kind of what that, how to do it safely. And these are 5-story buildings, so they're not, crazy enough to get up and walk on. But they're pitched roofs, and, you don't want to injure or break the material that you're trying to inspect. And it was so crazy. I remember I was at home for Christmas break, or I was at home for a recruiting break back at home with my dad, and he had bought this drone from, I think it was like the mall or something, one of those like little kiosks that you see. And I was like, he was playing with it. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, I just found this thing. It was like $30. And we were playing around with it in the living room, and we were trying to land it on a box. And, these are the ones that you can probably still buy today. And he just like really stirred this idea of like, man, like how can we use these things outside of just, playing around? And at that time, there was a company that was really starting to commercialize a lot of this, for more consumers, and hey, you didn't have to be a hobbyist to build these things. And he had just bought the $30 cheap one at the mall, and sure enough, a couple months later, this new one came out that it was basically you go to, I remember Hobbytown USA was right at Walnut Hill and 75, and went up the road and bought one, and told our project manager at the time, I was like, hey, I think the money that we're spending on man lifts to get up there and inspect a lot of this roofing stuff, if we could maybe apply that in another spot, like what could that do for us? And he was like, hey, this is somewhat of a crazy idea that could work. Mm-hmm. And we went up, bought it that day, downloaded all the apps. And this was like, gosh, I think this was probably 2014, 2015. I'd have to look, like the original Phantom 2 Vision. Right. That was like the name of it. Mm-hmm. And, the white case that you would imagine and all that stuff. And yeah, it's crazy. I remember the first time we flew it, the first time we like got back in the office and like pulled it up on the big screen, the 42-inch, right? I think it was a 70-inch, but it was like the biggest TV. And I'll never forget the look on just all of our faces of like, oh my gosh, this like actually is a thing. Mm-hmm. And it was just cool because like my dad and I have always grown up tinkering around, things at home and RC cars and remote things. And it was just fun. It was fun that like seed really planted an idea that, my dad was invested in, I was invested in. I was like, man, this is really cool. Like, what can we do with this? And, long story short, now we're here. So,
all right, so go ahead, Kev.
I was going to say that I remember you flying that up in SMU and how cool it was. And then you kept pushing innovation. And then it started being like a point of contention because the next innovation, you might know where I'm going with this, but on Big Glass Tower, it became the punch list device.
Yeah,
and
right.
Like, hey, if the architect can't get on the swing stage or see it from the ground, like we are not punching this thing with a drone 2 feet away from the building, or I'm going to be buried. Yeah. And so that's when the innovation started like being a point of frustration for subcontractors. We're like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah, you can't look that close.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna take us back because I guess I don't know. It looks like maybe you touched this LinkedIn post recently, but is it a couple days ago?
Yeah.
Man, this was awesome.
Oh, that's cool.
Go find Grant Hagen on LinkedIn. He did a really great post a couple days ago, and it has a picture of your dad on there. Have you seen this?
No.
You need to like go back and check it out. There's a picture of Grant and his dad with one of these drones you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's a cool picture of a younger version of you.
Yeah.
And your dad. But tell us about your Paul, man. Tell us about growing up and stuff like that.
Man, it was so fun. My dad's just always been a more like good friend than I feel like, now being a new dad and seeing just kind of that friendship, relationship. It's just fun. He was really big on finding things that like always kept us connected, which in ways didn't feel connected, right? So we would, play basketball with a little Tykes thing, down in our basement back before I'd go to school, or, he'd pick me up and we'd go find the latest thing at a hobby store or, things like that. And it's just been fun. I think he really understood the importance of non-traditional things to build relationships, between a father and son, and just have always appreciated that. And, our relationships certainly changed a lot over time too. I'd say, in high school, it was so fun. There were so many things I remember with him that was just really close and just felt deeper in that friendship. And, when I went off to school, which was a couple hours away, that our, relationship changed. And it was a really different season for us because, my dad didn't go to a 4-year school. And so he didn't necessarily know a lot of the things that that change in season like entailed, and he would tell me that, and I think just being in a different location was hard as well when I was at home all the time and got to see him and interact with him. But so that season was a little tough coming off of high school. It was like, man, I spent time with you all the time, and then obviously after school I moved down to Dallas, and that was a huge 13-hour difference from being at home. And yeah, we just have had to go through a lot of just real and raw seasons of just change. And I think, it's funny, a big event that really, I think, made our relationship a lot, stronger in ways that coming off of college and then obviously moving down here is we found another thing that kept us connected, and that was camping. And, we got to go out on some really fun camping trips that I should probably call it glamping, more so than just like, tent camping. But yeah, that was something that I think really re-sparked our relationship in a lot of ways. And this, the drone stuff obviously was one of those things too. But yeah, when you go from seeing someone, a family every day when you're in high school to, seasonally over breaks at college, and then, holidays over, being across the country, it just changes things. And it was really challenging to go through those seasons, but super grateful. It's fun posting stuff like that about, a parent, because they go through so much of your life. And, now being a parent, you don't really appreciate those things in ways that maybe until you get in that season of life. And so I certainly wanted to celebrate that, change in jobs and career with him, because yeah, he was a big part of it. And he would be the first to tell you like, oh no, he's done great things and, gone and made a great name for himself or gotten to do a lot of things. But he doesn't get enough of the credit of just like really sparking some of those ideas. And so it was fun to celebrate that and kind of put his name out there too.
Did you talk to him about that post?
I haven't actually.
Has he seen it?
I don't know if he has seen it. I tagged him in the picture. And what's funny about that picture is, so obviously went to Iowa State, and he's wearing a Hawkeye shirt, which is the University of Iowa. And so there's so much in that picture that's just, I mean, I remember that day when we flew it. I remember, taking the picture and going back and seeing, me wearing Iowa State and him wearing Iowa. It was just, I haven't told him about it yet, but it was just funny.
My favorite part is the white New Balance.
Oh,
he is rocking the white New Balance.
He's full dad mode.
And I think I got the Flofers on too, or the something that definitely doesn't match my outfit attire, but it was pretty funny.
That's cool. It's a cool thing to get to share with your dad, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about mom?
Yeah, mom definitely would say she was the one that I got a lot of my creativeness from. Mm-hmm. She is just so like resourceful, I think, in ways that I probably haven't appreciated until like this season of life and being a parent too. And I should say my parents were divorced, and so they got divorced when I was, I think, in first or second grade. And so both remarried, both incredible step parents, and so that dynamic definitely played in a lot from the early ages of growing up in middle school and high school. And they both stayed in the same town, which was really awesome. So I got to split time with them really throughout the middle school and high school time frame. And but mom was always just like the most creative. She found these just random things that she is like the ultimate fixer-upper. I think she really like has taught me how to take something from nothing and to really make something out of nothing, in ways that just like more like arts and creative type stuff. But I've definitely sensed and recognized on the back end of like, man, like who like showed me that? Like who kind of like gave that as an experience that maybe I didn't like see. And it was pretty clear, like looking back and kind of reflecting, like, man, my mom really excels in that. And it's so fun because she would say that's like more of a hobby and not something that she like is maybe intentional about like doing, but it's just been really fun. She has always just been there. Like what's funny is in high school, I would say my mom and I weren't as close, but then in college, my mom and I were super close. She went to a 4-year school. She kind of knew the challenges of like what life was going to be like in that season, and was just really close and helpful in a lot of ways. We had like weekly phone calls that we would always try to connect with. And it was fun. I think, in that season of being in college, she just could like relate on a different way. And it's just really clear looking back. Like I think God really had just protection over me in those different seasons of having a great relationship with my dad in high school and then mom. And it's obviously all now full circle. It's like getting married a couple years ago, everyone's down here and everyone's like celebrating a season of, getting married and having a kid. And, yeah, it's just fun looking back. It's, obviously when you're in those moments, you don't like see any of that in full detail or picture, but, just really thankful to like have that perspective. And I think one thing you said is like, hey, have you told them that? It's like, I probably don't do a good enough job of telling them that. And, definitely more opportunities to do that, but it's fun.
Isn't it weird how like the perspective of life lets you reflect on those moments from forever ago and just see them through a different lens, a more thankful lens sometimes, a more reflective, contemplative lens sometimes. Yep. But Kevin and I had that moment today. I won't overshare whose story it is, but like we were talking about someone whose mom had passed. And I was like, man, that story, don't know that individual, but just knowing that story makes me want to just like leave work right now and just go sit with my mom today. Just because I'm so much more thankful now than I was when I was 16 and she was like ruffling through my backpack trying to figure out, like it's just so much different.
Yeah.
And I have a tendency to still take it for granted because my parents live close. I see them all the time. And so I'm just like this weekend, for example, we'll have, our fairly standard 1 million basketball games and they'll be there just like they've always been there. Yeah. And I take it super for granted. So that's just a really good like reflection point for me personally.
Yeah. And it's interesting too. So my wife's family's in Houston and her siblings live here in town, which definitely like fills that bucket of having family close. But yeah, it's definitely something that's challenging. I remember when both my folks were like, I had an opportunity to work in Kansas City after school. And I think they were hoping and thinking that was like a really good opportunity to work there, just being a little closer to home. And just remember Dallas being a little bit better opportunity from a just landscape and kind of size and all that kind of fun stuff. But like, yeah, I think they were definitely supportive, but yet bummed of, man, like that's a long way away. And I remember, I think it was like, my wife will have to correct me on this. I think it was like our first date. My wife was like, hey, would you ever move back to Iowa? And I remember thinking like, well, hey, of course, like that could be on the table, but I love it here, And I think that, man, that's kudos to God going before both her and I with just some incredible relationships here with people that have just invested in us and taken us in and given us just so many things that we can think now of like, it'd be really hard to leave. And who knows where God will take us both. But like, it's just been fun to look back and see like, hey, this has felt like home, even though it's not like physical home where we grew up.
Yeah, I get that.
I would say this, I've been here since 2010 from Chicago. And this feels like more home than when I go back to home to visit for the holidays. So I'm hoping my parents someday will move here because we hold their only grandchild.
Yeah, right.
Like, they're like, all right, we're retiring, we're moving.
Grandchildren are now the currency of where people move to and where
for sure.
Yeah,
grandchildren are the currency.
Yeah, that sounds terrible. Edit that part out.
Nah, I told you, bro. One take.
Yeah.
So I know you as somebody rooted in their faith.
Yeah.
Did you grow up with that?
Yeah,
or is that something that sparked in adulthood?
Yeah, totally. So my kind of story of faith, I would say grew up in a Lutheran home back in Iowa, which super thankful for. I think even seeing the perspective of it now is like, man, there are a lot of ways that God was just planting seeds in that season and really thankful for the way in which I was brought up, the place in which I was brought up, both from my family and the people that I remember in that season. I would definitely say on this side of it, like the gospel was never really like influential as a part of my life back there. I remember.
Let me hit pause right there because I have millions of questions about church and growing up in church. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, and so I know two different churches in my whole life. Well, that's not entirely true, but in reality, a small Southern Baptist church and Watermark.
Yeah.
They couldn't be. What's it like? What's growing up in a Lutheran church look like kind of in that comparison paradigm? I have no idea.
Yeah, totally. So there's like a physical and then a spiritual sense. Yeah. Physical is like, okay, there's wooden pews and there's hymn books and like liturgies and things that are very like ingrained into that, like just part of, I guess, life and religion in that, sense. But it was on the spiritual side of it. Like I remember, like I could probably articulate the gospel back then, but it definitely wasn't something that was like actively impacting my life. And I think there's been times down here that I've certainly like thought like, man, did I just like miss it? Did I like not understand it? And I think it just in that season, God didn't have me. Like my heart wasn't fully His in that season, and he's had me the whole way. Like that's never been in question, but it's just more of like, I don't know that I ever sensed my like true need and dependence on him in that season. And I don't think that's anything as like indicative on the Lutheran church or anything like that. It was just the season of life that I was in. And that's totally okay. And I've definitely had to like process through that though. Cause even in school, like I remember multiple people inviting me to the Porch is Watermark's kind of young adult ministry. And there was a ministry at our school that people would invite me to. And I just wasn't interested at the time. And I think it wasn't really truly until I came down to Dallas. And what I've just told folks is like, man, Dallas was this much bigger playground. It was much bigger, just things for me to get drawn to from both an identity and just mess in a lot of ways. And I don't think it was truly until then that like my heart was like in a position for God to be like, hey, big boy, you're going to need something outside of yourself. Not only just here in the present, but like spiritually for eternity. And it was just the season in which he had me, and really grateful. Like I remember the first time I walked into it, like someone at that SMU job actually invited me to church down here. And I was like, well, I've been to church before. Like, sure, let's get this. Yeah, no, it was awesome. And I was like, sure, I'll come. And he said, we're going to have barbecue at the end, which I'm like, all right, this is means for barbecue. Let's go check this thing out. And no joke, I remember walking in for the first time. There were like fog machines and lights, and like there weren't pews. There were like actual like theater seats, and there was a stage. And like, I just remember feeling like, it was like yesterday. I remember like it felt like I was walking into a concert, and he was like, hey, we're going to get like the best seats, like front row and all this stuff. And I just remember like looking around, and the lights went out, and lights are on the stage, and people were, raising their hands and all this stuff. I couldn't even remember what they talked about, but I just remember walking into this like much different experience. And in a way, I think my takeaway from that though is like, hey, I don't know what's going on first, right? But the second was like, hey, there's something that seems to be way more like genuine and authentic about the way these people are worshiping. And again, couldn't tell you what the like message was that day or anything, but I think that opened the door to have someone that invited me to Watermark to that young adult ministry that ultimately was the means that I think God used to kind of like say, hey, the things that you're chasing may not be the things that are worth chasing. Yeah.
That's a almost direct parallel down my story, man. Same, right? Like when you're telling that, I'm like, oh, yeah, it sounds very, very, very familiar. Except I persisted have I told you this before? I persisted on wearing my suit to church, even though everybody was wearing like board shorts and flip-flops. Because I was like, man, these people don't understand.
Yeah.
Cover your toes for Jesus, would you?
Yeah, like, get yourselves together.
He wore sandals. I'm wearing sandals.
But then I finally gave that up. Now you just wear a baseball cap. It's all good. It's totally fine.
And it just takes a change, right? Like, I don't know. There's something about rituals that I definitely had to get past, because I was like, wait a second. Like, I remember feeling like it being authentic, but then I was like, wait, is this authentic? Like, are these people here for the right reasons? And there's just, I don't know. That's an interesting topic to even dive into on that front.
So this pinpoint me in time. We're talking 2012? Yeah, 14,
so
something like that.
Moved down here in 2012. Really, I think I started going to the Porch probably in like 2013, 2014. I remember there was a series at the Porch. So the Porch, for those folks who don't know, young adult ministry, Watermark Community Church, Tuesday nights, 7 to 9, 3,000 plus people. So like more than I could even imagine. And
the teaching there is just like straight down the fairway for that stage of life.
Yep.
Like so good.
Yep. And I think that's what really was the biggest kind of change was, I remember going to, church on Sundays when I was younger, and it was, hey, where are we at in kind of the season of the Lutheran calendar, and what does that look like, and the messages. And again, like it was scripture. So like you have to take that for what it was. And again, my heart just in that season wasn't ready for it. But what the Porch, I think, really did was what you exactly said. It was like, hey, like we're going to take an age demographic in a city demographic, in a life stage demographic to really like be laser focused on how the gospel should inform that season. Mm-hmm. And the series, so they do series just like any kind of other message on a Sunday. And the series that I was in, I'd have to go back and I think it was the fall of 2013. It was over Ecclesiastes in a book that I'm like, Old Testament, what does that mean? Probably couldn't even tell you 2 or 3 books in the Old Testament. And I just remember it like hitting my heart in a different way, where they were talking about King Solomon and all the things that like he was chasing after and all the things that like that were just meaningless. And I think the series was called Vanity. And vanity is just a word that is used a ton in that book. And I remember I'd been down here for a year, just kind of getting my feet wet in my career, and bigger playground for sure. And Dallas, can for sure, be lucrative in all those different areas of life. And this series was just like hitting me in a way where I was like, wait, you're telling me that this actual person in history is saying these things, got all these things, desired all these things, achieved all these things, and yet he's saying that it was meaningless. And that book is like historically seen as like kind of just a Debbie Downer book, and very like just sorrowful.
None of it matters.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, and of course you can go back and read it and, feel that way too. But man, that season, I just remember thinking like, hey, that's me. Like that's me wanting to climb the tower fast enough, or climb the ladder fast enough, do all these fun things fast enough. Like, and it just hit me in a way of like, okay, wait a second. I've kind of put this book off as just kind of this historical, not really contextually relevant to culture now. And I'm like, hey, this is relevant. Like this is actually happening in my life. And just remember, I think that being kind of the foot in the door that opened up like more of scripture to be like, okay, if I can believe this to be true about this story, what do I actually think and believe to be true about Jesus and like who he is and what that means? And I just remember thinking like that was something that really changed the tide in my walk and just faith of just like, hey, wait a second. If I believe parts of this to be true, the whole thing has to be true. And that was just something that hit me in a way that led to me like certainly starting to realize my need for a savior and how that was starting to impact my work life, my personal life with relationships, and starting to see like, oh, wait a second, this is a thing that's really starting to impact more areas of my life as I give more over to him. And it's scary. It's new. It's like, what am I supposed to do with this? But I think that infused with the community of people around you to say like, hey, like I know what that feels like. And I know what it means to like give up those things that you did on the weekend and maybe, approach relationships a completely different way. And I just remember like, wait a second, this just can't be a part of your life. This is your life. And it was something that, that season he certainly grabbed my heart and said, hey man, I'm not just your helper in this life, like to like get through and just make it by. Like I want to be your savior, and I want to, have you be with me for eternity. And that's going to, have it look like you trusting me, not only just for now, but, for eternity. So
one of the things you said through all that, I'm going to come back to, was being like in a community of people, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm assuming, well, you tell me, like through jumping in with a porch, you ended up in some small group with a bunch of bros, right?
Yeah, it really wasn't, there's the community of people and it's just, again, like kind of on the family stuff, you look back and you're like, man, God, I was totally going ahead and putting people in my life in different ways. And I remember there were a handful of people, the porch did a young adult retreat out in East Texas at a place called Sky Ranch. And I think Labor Day, a tenth of those 3,000 people going out there. And it was through like volunteering at that event that introduced me to some people where they're like, man, this guy, like, he really has some gifts and some excitement around just, loving and serving Jesus. And hey, we want to get him in more opportunities to meet and know more people. And it was really through that event over, multiple years and seasons that I think eventually I got to, plug in and meet more people. And it was the funny story about that whole thing was it sells out in, no joke, like seconds.
No, I remember.
And I actually didn't get on the list to go, but I remember I was just so, just excited about the idea of like getting to know those people or just getting to serve alongside those people. And I reached out to one of the team leads of, like events and games that weekend and said, hey, I'd love to help. I don't know what that looks like. and he didn't actually know that I didn't have a ticket yet, and that I was on the waiting list and all this stuff. And eventually had to come and tell him, like, hey, man, all this planning that I've kind of been helping with, I may not actually be able to do it there because I don't have a ticket. And he was just like shocked by that. And I was just like, well, no, I didn't want to just like sit on the sidelines and hope that it was a cool thing. Like, I wanted to be a part of it as much as I could. And full circle now, like, that guy was the best man at my wedding, like lives 2 houses down from us, and like just a really good spiritual friend that has just been there for so much part of life, who was a roommate for a season. He got married, has, 2 kids, another one on the way, has helped us move into the neighborhood that we're in and walked alongside of us with family stuff. So like the community part of it didn't necessarily go broad and wide at first. It was very like narrow and specific with a few individuals that, yeah, I think they just taught me what it like meant to be a Christian. Cause I was just like, I don't even know where to start. Like, what do you mean? Like, you shouldn't live with someone before you get married? Like, what do you mean you,
everybody else is doing?
Yeah. Or just like things that like culturally you're just like, well, I've never heard that. Like, I'd growing up in church, like that wasn't a thing that people like question, and he just, man, was and still is just like an incredible friend to me. And so and through that, obviously he, introduced me to a lot of people that have just gone really narrow and deep with, that have been, pillars of my faith, and great friends along the way.
And I struggled with, in jumping into like those sort of relationships, was like, let me back up. If you know anything about a Southern Baptist church, you put your fanciest clothes on and you pretend like you got it all together for Sundays, right? Sunday evening and prayer meeting, like that's it. And so this idea of like, well, no, I'm gonna engage relationally with some people and just be like, hey man, I kind of suck at this. What do you think about that? Can you help me with this? Like, I'm not sure I'm doing this right. Can you, like, this sort of relative vulnerability and being held accountable for some of the things like that you're wrestling through? I was like, nah, man, I'm good. Did you wrestle with that coming from a Lutheran background, or did it work out in a way that just felt more normative?
Yeah, I think, and I'll just use names. Eric was the guy. He just lived it in a way that was easy to replicate. Like,
gotcha.
He lived it in a way that I was like, hey, that just, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I see the fruit that's coming from the way that you're choosing to approach things, that it was very much a, hey, come and see, and it kind of a mentality. But I think coming from the Lutheran side of it, like the hardest part really is more of just, I think like the family dynamic of, when I first moved down here and going to a bigger church, and you start to tell, family and friends that, what you're doing, and you can't hide going on Tuesday nights and, going on Sunday, just things like that. And so you start to have conversations around that. And then you start to get into the denomination conversations of like, well, what is that? And what does that mean? And like, hey, how do you know that they're actually, a good thing, or just like, saying the right thing? And just that to me has probably been the hardest part, because at the end of the day, like, again, I wouldn't change anything from growing up in the Lutheran church. I think it definitely allowed the opportunity for me to see things maybe from a quicker perspective when I like came down here to a non-denominational church. But the biggest challenge has really just been to like, hey, here's what I understand the difference between a Lutheran background is, and here's what I'm understanding like the differences between a non-denominational background. And just having those conversations has been a little bit tricky, but if you don't have the conversations, then you're just like missing the opportunity. But
yeah, in
having them, it's like, oh, this is normal, and hey, we can and should feel comfortable with talking about that stuff.
The reflection I had while you were talking about the church small group, like my quote unquote church small group was the YCC.
Yeah,
because you just like become well yoked with other people. Like, because I was saved after I moved to Texas, so all that stuff was new to me.
Yeah,
and you go in and see the fog machine and all that. You're like, what is this? Like, this is a joke kind of thing. And then you get saved. You're like, oh, it's not. It's actually a really big deal.
Yeah.
But like Stuart, Foltz, Fisher, Daniel, Melanie, Josh, you get all these people, some of which they're behind you in age and experience, and then others out in front. So you get to watch how they're acting. And like, I want to be different. Like, why are you different?
Yeah.
For the right reasons. And well, let me tell you, and then you have that Christian, what does Foltz call it? The Jesus juke. You have that sort of conversation, but it's because I asked, I incited the conversation, and that's pretty cool to have, within our construction community. Just like so many people like that are a positive influence, not from what they're saying, but through their actions.
Yeah. I think the thing to pull from that's like crazy unique is like that was something that, I mean, YCC obviously not affiliated with any church place or plant, but the fact that like God had those people in that season for you, for the collective like construction community, like that's crazy. Like we've all seen crazy stuff in construction, right? Like Stuart, you're a lawyer, right? So it's
I've seen all the crazy stuff.
But it's like in an industry that is so ripe for, let's just say, not right things.
Yeah.
Like to have that be found in that industry is like, man, that is definition of like light on a hill, like in a spot that you get an opportunity to like engage and meet with those, not only like in your age group, but also like, man, in age groups that you need some perspective on down the road, or that you can help someone, behind you. So that to me is what I think is like, to your point, like made this place feel like a home, where it's like, hey, I don't just feel cared for from like a business sense. I feel cared for from like a personal sense, in so many different ways too.
Yeah, Texo and the YCC is unique in that regard. But I want to kind of not put a pin on that part of our conversation, but sort of a public service announcement here. Like, this is not an advertisement for Watermark or the Porch.
Yeah, for sure. I
mean, there if you're in the Dallas area, there are tons of great spots to land, and if you're not, there are tons of great spots to land. And so I would just encourage you, like, don't think of this, like, if you're listening, as like, that's a cool story for Grant.
Yeah,
like that's a cool story for you too. You just have to find your space, right? So if you're local and you're like, man, I don't know where to go, hit us up. I'll help you find a spot. And if you're not local, I have some friends down in Houston. They're like, man, I've been to y'all's church. I think it's awesome. I can't find one like that in Houston. And so I engaged with some people on staff. I was like, who are our like counterpart churches down there, and being able to like connect them with places that feel like that. And so hit us up, man, if you're looking for a space. Yeah. Don't feel like there's a PSA for Watermark.
And to that too, like not a PSA about the Porch either, but the Porch has like Porch Live location. So like right when I first started to join, they were like, hey, like how do we get this in more churches for this demographic? Because it's so hard to start a young adult ministry. Like, are you kidding me? And to start it in a place like Dallas or any other place in the country. And so they've kind of like Porch in a box. They call them Porch Live locations, where they stream out to churches that will host the Porch. And what's crazy is like one of the first ones was, no joke, like in my hometown. And I was like, it was just so like assuring and like just reaffirming, where I was like, wait a second, like, God, I see you on the move here. And like, I'm so silly to think that like you aren't on the move in like all these other areas of like creation.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you're a young adult listening, like the worst thing you can do is just to not ask those questions that you might have. And like, I was lucky to have a place and space that those questions could be asked, but man, the best thing you can do is ask someone about their faith, or ask someone about the questions that you have, because those ultimately open the door that God uses. And it's crazy. There's a lot more in that too. But yeah.
Is that where you met Natalie?
It's not where I met Natalie. Okay. No, I met my wife through some mutual friends, actually, but through a group somewhat associated to Watermark. So there's a gal on staff there that was a college roommate with Natalie's roommate at the time out in East Texas. So Natalie and I dated long distance for, probably a year to a year and a half when she was out working at Sky Ranch in East Texas. So she came to a 4th of July event, or I guess get together, hang out kind of thing, with a lot of folks that were from our church. And she was like the last person on the list that was like, yeah, sure, I'll come. And the rest is history. So.
Oh, whoa, yada, yada, yada. Now you're married.
Yeah. There's a lot in between there that, it's just crazy. A lot of life in there, that fun details that, if you know us, and well, if you know me, like I'm an overanalyzer, and we broke up and got back together, the whole nine. And man, like God definitely showed up in that season too, of just, hey, what does it look like to come from a divorced family and choose that commitment to be married? And luckily, my wife is incredible in the sense that was just extremely patient with me through that season. And obviously on the back end, we're extremely grateful for where God led us to and where we're at now. But yeah, there was a hard season in there for sure. Even with her moving to Dallas and then us not continuing from my decision and then choosing to get back together and eventually getting engaged and married. And yeah.
Boy, I'm going to ask a hard question, and you can tell me it's none of my business, and we'll move on.
That's okay.
But like, what does parents being divorced at a super early age like that do to your perspective of the institution of marriage?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Totally not off limits. I mean, divorce is something that impacts so many people, whether a chosen decision from a decision that someone's chosen to make, or something that they didn't choose to make. Like in my case, where my parents got divorced, and so it definitely affects it. And I would hate to say like it affects everyone, maybe in different categories or similar categories. I think for me, at a young age, it just opened up this idea of like, hey, what does trust like look like, or what does commitment look like, And I think I am like so beyond, without a doubt, like beyond thankful. My experience would have been completely different if my parents didn't live in the same, town.
Yeah.
And I mean, we did like Monday, Tuesdays with Dad, Wednesday, Thursdays with Mom, every other Friday, or whoever got the weekend got the Friday. And like, that was the case for a good like 6 years. And I had a sibling too, a sister who's 2 years older than me, that we went through it together too. And I certainly didn't know how much it impacted me until I was in the dating like season, and even through like really college. And I like didn't really date in high school, dated pretty seriously in college, but even in that season, like it was definitely bubbling up, and then I kind of just like suppressed it and said, oh no, that's not a big deal. And it honestly, it wasn't until, I just remember like having the courage to ask my parents, like, hey, what happened? Like, hey, what was it from your perspective? Hey, what was it from your perspective? And that was in a season where Natalie and I weren't together. And I think it took me getting some just understanding and clarity from that, and how that was not just a projected outcome on me, that I could kind of internalize and understand for what it was. And going back to like my relationship with my dad, like, man, that only just skyrocketed our like authenticity and just vulnerability and openness with each other, and couldn't have been more grateful for that. Like, but it was just something that I didn't really process. I didn't think I needed to process. I thought it was a life event, and of course you hear growing up like, hey, those life events impact everyone differently in different seasons. And at the end of the day, I didn't really give it the attention in this. I mean, there were people that unfortunately were being hurt by how much it was affecting me, and I had no idea. And I think it really took me having to like take a step back and say, hey, like, what was that? And I had to do that, not being in a relationship. And that was really hard to do. And especially to like tell that to someone that you'd been dating who had, moved to a different town and all that kind of stuff. And so, but man, praise God, she said yes to, come back. And after I got to process through a lot of that stuff, and have, been so grateful. Like, yeah, I mean, I could dive into that. That whole season was just really, really, and to have that in a season where now your faith is like a huge part of your life, right? Or is your life. And it was just really unique to have to unpack. But so grateful that, I should say, still unpacking, right? You don't just kind of take out the box and put it all out there and not, go through it over time too. And it still affects, parts of our relationships with our, families and whatnot. But
yeah, again, this is kind of to the point of being a little older and reflecting on everything changes the way you look about it. One of those comments I made earlier, but definitely as a older dude with some kids now, have these thoughts about how I always really just thought like I was who I was. And I lived in that house with my parents, but I was who I was, and didn't appreciate the influence that the environment, like my parents, where we lived, my friend, all that, what that influence had on who I have become, good and bad, right? Good and bad. And so it's thinking about it for rear facing is interesting, but then thinking about how now that you have other humans in your home, that you are now in the position where you are creating, shaping those experiences moving forward for those people, right? And that, I think of that very often, about how like I'm modeling what it looks like to be a husband for my boys. I'm modeling what it looks like to be a husband for my daughter. I am modeling what, and shaping those experiences so that when they get out into the world and they look back, what are they going to say?
Yeah.
I mean, we had this conversation at the office this week about what are your kids going to remember when they're gone from your house? What are they going to remember? And how you can, with the forethought to have that question, ask that question now, you can influence the outcome. You can influence what they actually say. And so, anyway, just a mental meandering of my own this week around kind of that issue of like your past affects the current.
Yeah, and my wife had a very different experience growing up. I mean, she was one of three in a house of 25 plus years married, Southern Baptist, like super strong family. And so that for her was like really different to go through. And I mean, we talked about it for the first time we met and how that, but it's different when you go through it, right? Like that's what makes it really challenging. But to your point, like never falling in the camp that it's not important to at least like be intentional and thoughtful of like, hey, what we do matters and how we choose to like lead our family matters. And again, to like your point, like to, hey, surround yourself with others that you see doing that really well. Like that doesn't just happen. Like you don't just fall out of the sky being a good dad. You don't fall out of the sky being like a really good, colleague to someone. It's like you do that by watching and seeing and like interacting with other people. And so
the to-dos and the not to-dos.
Yeah.
Along the way.
Equally
important.
Yeah.
For sure. You got some? I have another place to go. You got something?
Well, I was going to say before we spin out a family,
okay.
Kiddo.
Yeah.
I don't know. So tell me.
Yeah. So August.
Plus or minus 1 year old.
That's right. We know it's under 1.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So last August we had our first. His name is Henry. He is just a little stud, man. We didn't find out the gender, which was just an interesting experience. Natalie was, I would say, a little bit bigger proponent of that, which I didn't have a super strong opinion. But I bring that up because I was probably more sold on it being a girl. We thought it was like totally going to be a girl. We had tons of friends that had girls first and was just kind of always in that camp. And out pops Henry and his boy. And I was like, oh my gosh. And we didn't have a name for like 2 or 3 days. And the Social Security lady comes into your room like, oh, what's his name? And like, we don't know. And they're like, how do you not know?
Could you make a lap around the maternity ward to get back with you?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You want to see the picture of one of the cutest kids I've ever seen?
Oh my gosh.
You ready for this?
Is that him?
Yes.
Oh, dude, that's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a cute kid, man.
Yeah, I just showed a picture of him when we brought him back up to Iowa in the bitter cold snowstorm that it was, and he has a little cute hat on, and he's just. I read somewhere, and I hope. Well, I'm experiencing this to be true, that your first son is more like your wife, and your first daughter is more like your husband or the husband. I don't know if that's true. People can probably fact check me and reach out to y'all if that is true or not. But we have certainly seen that to be true. Like he is so chill, very much like his mom. I feel like it's hard talking about baby experience because everyone has a different one.
Sure.
And but man, he's just been such a sweet gift, and he's just been really fun. And talk about learning from a fire hose. It's like couldn't be more true to have a spouse that really you want to do and tackle life with. And I remember a big thing just wrestling through that, like, hey, do I want to get married? Do I not want to get married? To Natalie, and just those seasons of life, I was like, if I can be assured of one thing, like she is going to be an incredible mom. And I remember just constantly hanging my hat on that at the end of the day, or just like processing things. And man, that has like wholeheartedly been true. And it's just so fun to see her being a mom and doing life with her, and dirty diapers and all bottles and bottles of just all that stuff. And it's been fun. He's been a really fun joy for us.
I think probably, air date. This will be quick flip air date. So not yet, but soon to be stay at home mom, like just full time all day mom.
Yep.
That's a hard job, buddy.
And that's another whole part of life of just what that season for women is like, and just having kids and going through life and career thoughts, and man, couldn't be more proud of the way that she's processed it, thought through it, sought counsel, sought a lot of just wisdom and feedback, and then just taking that before the Lord and saying, hey, like, what would you have me do? And so, yeah, we're really excited about that season.
What's one thing you guys do as a married couple that you think is like your marriage hack?
No marriage hacks. Man. if you have them, I'll gladly take them. It's funny. I don't know that we have. It's been funny that this has like become our thing, and it was before we had Henry, and has certainly become it now. And I don't know how many times it takes for something to be a tradition, right? But Saturday mornings we go to Central Market for breakfast. If you haven't been to Central Market for breakfast, you're missing out. I wouldn't say it's a hack, but it's pretty cool. You just go and they have actually pretty good coffee, and you get breakfast tacos and, muffins and all that kind of stuff. But we go there on Saturday mornings, and man, it's just a really healthy place for us to bring stuff up, talk about things like, hey, how was the week? What's next week look like? And, we were afraid that having a little one brought into that picture would like change that dynamic. And we brought him along a handful of times now. And it's just been fun. It's been a safe place for, I think, us out of the house that doesn't feel like it's, something that you can just bring up anything. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we don't even talk about anything like super deep or serious, but that for sure has been one of just knowing that that's, you can table stuff for then, right? So if you're like into knee deep on something throughout the week that's just causing you to be frustrated, it's like, hey, I can wait till Saturday and we can bring it up and talk about it then. And we don't hit every Saturday, but it is fun thinking back on like, man, where were the best conversations had, or some of the things that we like worked through the most. And, that's probably been one of them. And then second, just like, I mean, we've already talked about like the community of people, but man, if you do marriage alone, it is just hard. Being married is hard, right? And I think the hard part of it is when you're doing it by yourself and you just don't have people speaking into it or encouraging you along the way. And, the deceitfulness of sin will creep in, especially to something that is like designed by God and an opportunity for the enemy to, attack. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, how do you counter that deceitfulness of sin? And it's like, well, encouragement, and you need people, and, people are the means in which you are encouraged through. And man, it doesn't have to be a formal group of community. It doesn't have to be, something that is, routine, which two of those things I think are very important. But man, if you don't have someone that you're talking about how you're doing with your spouse, I just think that's a path that could get rockier and rockier down the road.
I was going to spin us out to, as I recall, one of I don't know if it was first, very early on, you and I had lunch, and I think I brought William along.
Yeah.
Remember this?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's because you had either gone to or were going to Israel. I forget exactly what it was.
I think I had just gotten back from Ethiopia, because you guys were going to go on a trip to Ethiopia as well.
Rwanda. We went to Rwanda.
Rwanda. Okay. Yeah. I remember maybe it was Israel.
It was related to Israel because William, this was like his 4th or 5th grade project
that's
he was doing on Israel.
Yeah.
And I was like, you need to talk to Grant.
Dude, that was so fun.
He would just come back because that was the impetus of meeting, was like, tell him all about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you've had the opportunity to go to lots of cool places.
Yeah. Oh, man.
And not always just for fun. Like, these are like what I would deem probably short-term mission trip stuff.
Yeah. Gosh, that was on script. One of the things you sent last night, I was like, man, yeah, I've been so grateful to just see different parts of the world that I think, as I think about like, hey, what has been the best part about going and seeing these different places? Like, by far the best spot is just like, man, growing your idea and expansion that God is like huge. Like, we are so small and he is so big. And I think, like, of course I could dive into all the places that has been so fun to see that, but like the thing that's connected all these trips in really fun ways is like seeing God's hand in these different places. So I had a really fun chance to go to Seoul, South Korea a couple times for work, drone related and some other things related to. And I just remember being there and I'm like, man, I'm literally 12 hours in a plane, couldn't be more across the other side of the world, and just seeing people worship there and the authenticity of it, and at a church that we happened to, design, and we were doing a video to kind of show people what that design looked like. It was just an incredible experience, and the people there and how hospitable they were, and to go a couple times was just like mind-boggling to think. And then on the like personal side of it, and going to, Haiti and El Salvador and Ethiopia, like obviously those are more like mission type trips where I hate even using the word mission because they're just short-term discipleship, right? You're going there and discipling people as if you were, here in your neighborhood. But yeah, those trips definitely opened my eyes to the reality of like, man, we are so privileged here in ways that we have such an insignificantly like small view of. I remember coming back from Haiti the first time and of like, I've never been thankful for carpet in my life. And you just like kind of think of like, well, why am I thankful for carpet? And it's just like opening up your mind to like, man, these are things that we just inherently take for granted, right? And then to go to Israel is just like, yeah, just mind-boggling. I mean, to see this book that we read and dedicate and like have inform and influence so much of our life, like in color, is just like an unbelievable experience. I mean, I have been fortunate to go a couple times, one like pretty similar trips, but one in 2017 and then one in 2020, which no joke was like February 2020 before COVID.
Oh, wow.
And
eat that in.
It was, and to go in 2020 with my wife was just so fun. I mean, she had gone before we got married, and man, anyone that has any interest, like desire, thought, even those that don't even like, I mean, we talked about it. It's just incredible. Like there's no, like, I have dates written in like my Bible of like places that you go visit. And I think it's so many times we like get caught up and we're reading and we're like, man, like this just doesn't seem real. Like this just doesn't seem like, it doesn't seem like applicable. Mm-hmm. And it's like, wait, no, I like look at that date and I'm like, no, like I can go on a map and like see that. And to like come back and share that with people was just like, such a fun experience. So I never would have thought, when I moved down here, other than knowing that, DFW is like an international airport, that I would have had as many chances to go see different parts of, the world. And would definitely say like before I became a believer, that was definitely like an idol for me of like, man, I want to do it all now. Like I want to soak it up now. I want to go to these places now, and like would very much spend in ways that wasn't probably the best, and go and like invest time in those things that wasn't the best, to go travel anytime I got the opportunity to. And like becoming a believer now, it's like, well, wait, I can see all those things on that side of eternity. And like, I don't have to, see everything now. Like I'm going to see everything in eternity. And I think that that's the thing I've struggled with in, feeling really fortunate to have gone to those places, is like when you tell people those stories, they're like, oh man, I want to go do that. Like I want to go see those things. I want to go, be those places, or I want to go to Israel. It's like, that is an example. And I'll tell you, like, I think the thing that's encouraged me and others the most coming back is like, hey, the reality is like, we don't need to see those places. Like, yes, it is unbelievably like encouraging to our own faith and like just galvanizing to the things we believe in, but like, we don't have to see them. Like scripture says, like our faith in those things is as like strong as actually physically seeing them. And so to that point of it too, it's just hard because I feel really fortunate to have gone to a lot of those places, but hopefully have a healthy perspective of like, hey, I'd love to go to them again, right? Like I'd love to go take more people and like see their eyes and see their like, connections that they get to make in ways that I got to when I was there. But in the same ways, like we don't have to see to believe, and that's okay. But it is fun to celebrate and look back and see a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Mm-mm.
Let's work talk for a second, because I want to get us to like what your new jam is, and I'll let you tell as much of the story that got you to a new job as you want, or want to. But
totally.
Tell us a work story arc angling towards what's up now.
Yeah, totally. So while I was at that construction company, just had a really ton of opportunities, like we kind of talked about, just to try new things, implement new things as it relates to just being more efficient and safer, and all things hardware, software related, right? And I think just over my career there, being there for 10 years, like really had a realization of like, hey, this is like a really great utilization of like the strengths that God's given me in ways that I love, like connecting with people and like presenting or like explaining or educating, like, and like taking strength finders and being like, hey, like this is what I love to do. Like these are God-given things that like clearly he has given me a passion and a fire like to go and do. And man, so thankful in the ways that I got to do that in that season. And it was clear like there were really good opportunities to help more people. And as I kind of started to see that, I think that's where some of the opportunities kind of turned of like, hey, I'm so thankful for this season that I've been in here. But I see more opportunities to help more people. And that's really where kind of the curtain got drawn back a little bit more to say, hey, like, what would that look like? And I thought I would be there for life. You know, I mean, you move halfway across the country and you intern there when you're still in school. Like there's just a lot of life that was done in that season and a lot of life change, right, in that season. And so it took me a while to like process through that reality of what that could look like. And I think once I processed through that, ultimately just having some conversations of, hey, what could that look like, and what could that be? And so, yeah, really excited. I've transitioned more into, I would say, something more specific in technology and construction that was just, much more suited for where I think my strengths are and how I can help and serve other people.
Where purpose meets opportunity, man.
Yeah.
And then you just ignite the fire.
Yeah.
So what is it specifically?
Yeah. Sorry, I feel like I'm kind of...
let's plug it, man.
No, yeah. This
Name,
is...
purpose, scope, hit it.
Totally. So the company I'm working for is a company called DroneDeploy. So DroneDeploy, really incredible people. They develop software to be able to use consumer drones that you could go buy at Best Buy, Amazon, for commercial purposes. So they're not a hardware company. We develop software to be able to use those in a commercial sense. So what that means is being able to take those off-the-shelf drones or aerial cameras, whatever you want to call them, and to be able to like put them to work in ways that you would put to work a forklift or put to work any other piece of equipment on your job. And so the excitement around that was just really awesome opportunity to take what I had gotten to do and kind of like building and scaling a drone program at that company and helping more people like see the value that was behind it. And so, as I was like thinking like, what does that look like? The software world's so different from what I was doing in construction. Really started to kind of outline of like, hey, like what roles are in software? Like what titles? I don't even know. I don't even know this thing. Right. Yeah. And just starting to do some kind of research of like, hey, titles aren't like crazy important, but they definitely can bring clarity, which was helpful. And I think where we landed on was, I think title wise, like strategic product consultant of DroneDeploy to allow in their specific AEC vertical. So they serve a whole host of different like market sectors like agriculture and mining and aggregates and things like that. And construction obviously being one of them too. And so they had a really big need to be able to take someone from the industry to help both their internal team and then also their customers that they interacted with on the AEC side of life or architecture, engineering, and construction. So, yeah, just really different change. It's a remote job, so being at home, being able to see Henry on a day-to-day basis, and having a wife at home too to be able to see and interact with too. Like, I think it was a really unique opportunity in this season of life that just made a lot of sense and definitely involved a lot of risk from hey, it's just different. Mm-hmm. And it's not something that I maybe have grown like comfortable with over a long period of time, but ultimately knew and just sought a lot of wisdom from a lot of people that have gone through a transition and have gone through just what that looks like. And ultimately, been really excited so far, and the journey has just begun, and we're really excited about what it could turn into.
I mean, this is a shameless plug for Grant Hagen. But if you have stuff like that on your project, call Grant. Like this, like seriously, man, you have been at the forefront of this since the jump. Every time I've ever had any question about any of it, you're like, yeah, let's grab lunch and talk about it. So much so, I think my mind is failing me a bit. But didn't you like hop on a panel with me?
Yeah,
we did like a whole presentation for, I forget what AGC maybe.
Yeah.
on drones and just like, you're the man, dude. You're the expert. So if somebody has questions, like, catch up with Grant for sure. That's a unsolicited and shameless plug for a homie who I know is like just a good dude.
Yeah, that's really kind. It's just, I think we were talking about this before. It's just a unique technology because, you know, when you think of construction, you think like, hey, time, cost, safety, efficiency, like 3 or 4 things that like you always consider as you bring in a new idea or a new concept. And I think what made this technology and really idea just like explode in our space is that traditionally you maybe get 2 or 3 of those. Like something may be cost effective, but may take a lot of time or may not be the most safe, right? But when you can like have all 4 or 5 of those things, it like totally, I mean, I hate to use the word game changer, but it does change the game of how things are done. And that just like was so exciting to see and so fun to be a part of really early on. I think when you're kind of a pioneer, you're, you know, whacking trees down to, you know, make way for what this could be. And you know, hit brush a lot of the way and, you know, get, you know, tired and exhausted of like, man, is this a thing? Is this not a thing? But when you start to hear, you know, the stories and the things that people are like, man, this, we remove someone from having to be in a dangerous like position. And it's like, oh, well that's just worth it. Right. Mm-hmm. Like there's things you look back and you're just like, that just makes sense. And it's been a really fun just thing to be a part of. And I hope, you know, I did a couple webinars on like the topic of like, oh, is it a toy or a tool? Because I think a lot of people, you know, see them as toys because you can get them on Amazon and give them out as Christmas gifts and things like that. And yes, like they are perceived as toys. Like that's not, I remember like kind of closing the webinar with like, that's not the problem. The problem is that if folks don't see them as tools, like they are actual tools that, you know, a lot of companies are using to mitigate risk and to, you know, be better collaborators of what, you know, is going on the job site. So yeah, it's been really fun. And honestly, I use this pun way too much, but I mean, the sky truly is the limit. Like there is so like while the tip of the iceberg, the last, probably 7-8 years has been really fun and exploratory. It is mind-boggling to think what the next 8 years are going to look like. And that part of it just gets me like so excited in ways that it kind of like brings that renewed energy like it was at the beginning of like, man, this is crazy. Like, can you believe that we're doing this and using this? And my hope is just to like never lose that like youthfulness, excitement around it because yeah, at times it can just feel like, oh, this is cool. And yep, I'm like, and it's fun, like meeting up with you and your son or meeting up with people that are like genuinely curious about it. Like their excitement re-excites you. And I think excitement is just contagious. And even if it's over things that I've like helped on 1,000 times, like it still never gets boring because it's like, it's just such a applicable thing for our industry. And again, if you take anything away, it's like, man, at the end of the day, if it's saving lives and preventing people from being in positions that aren't safe, win.
Yeah. I know with innovators, I've tried to stop saying, and I want to know if this frustrates you.
Yeah.
I've stopped saying, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Because innovators usually like, yeah, cool, but it's also useful.
Yeah.
Like VDC, for example.
Yeah.
Like spinning all these 3D models and the parts that come together. I used to catch myself saying, yeah, that's really cool. And they're like, I don't think you're seeing it. You know? Did you ever have that?
Yeah. Like, oh, that's cool is like dismissive of the value that it brings.
Totally unintentional.
Yeah.
Like it's cool. Like
I think in that it's more the tone, right? Like if you say it in a tone like, oh, that's cool, like or like, oh,
cool story, bro.
Yeah, right. It definitely doesn't bother me. The toy thing bothered me for a while because it was like, oh, you just play with toys on a job site, and it's
that's
like
you're cool.
Okay, like I understand how you got there, but maybe if you're interested in having a conversation, I'd love to tell you why I don't see it as a toy. Yeah. But I think a lot of that is just how you like what state you're in receiving that, right? It was like, oh, I've had 5 people tell me that. So like now I'm, all in on that being like super frustrating. But,
yeah.
All right. So our wrap up MO here. Well, let me pause. Do we miss anything?
Dude,
when we go off script, I feel like we left something on the table. Tell me if we missed something.
Man, the 854 text I'm seeing here, I think you
smash that. It's almost like we've recorded a podcast before.
Man,
boom.
I think I know where you're going on the end here, but if you don't ask it, then I'll hit it.
What's that?
Just one big thing.
Oh yeah, we're gonna hit that. But are you a reader? You got a book for me?
Man, I'm not a very good reader. When I saw that, I was like, God dang it, I got to make up some book that.
Good books. Google.
Yeah, I'm more of a podcaster. Obviously, being here and
let's take a left-hand turn. Yeah. Can we take a left-hand turn? What are you listening to? Hit us with the
podcast.
podcast.
Script completely.
Right, sure.
This all podcast, it was actually Natalie introduced me to it. She had, which I don't know why she started listening to it, but we've listened to it on car rides going down to Houston or just long drives that we've had. And it's called How I Built This.
Oh yeah, Guy Raz.
Yeah, incredible. Just I think appreciating the stories behind. So if you haven't heard of it, it's entrepreneurial podcast of how really not just small companies, huge companies, how they started. Stories are just such an impactful medium in so many ways that it's just, Guy is an incredible host. NPR is an incredible producer of it. It is just time after time, quality content. And so as someone who loves the Shark Tank stuff and just starting up things and, it's a helpful perspective to remember hey, this stuff just doesn't happen overnight. And more than likely the stories that you hear are just encouraging because you may be at different parts of that story, and it's really fun to think of. Yeah,
worth the grind. Kind of like the tip of the iceberg deal. What you got below that,
dude.
All the hustle and grind. We talked to Javier Huerta about that a lot. You just see successful painting company, but man, there's a hustle and a grind to get to that point.
100%.
What's the guy who does the dirty jobs? What's that guy's name? You know
Mike Rowe. Mike
Rowe.
Mike Rowe. Mike Rowe has a podcast. I can't think of the name of it. If you listen, it's like.
Dirty
That's
Jobs?
Not how I heard the story or something like that.
Mike actually was at, there's a construction software called Procore. He spoke at their conference one year, and I got to hear him in person. And dude, the guy, as genuine anytime you see him or hear him. But he talked about his podcast. I haven't listened to it, but talk about podcast voice. He's
for sure.
He does so many voiceovers for.
It's called The Way I Heard It.
Yes. Yep.
And the reason I'm reverse pitching that to you and our listeners is because it has a similar feel to How I Built This with Guy Raz.
Nice.
Except he'll tell these sort of intermediate form stories.
Okay.
You're just sucked into them, and you get to the end, and then there's a 1 punch, 2 punch, and you're like, oh, that's a story about Henry Ford, and that's the way I heard it, and it's over, and you're like, what? And so it has a really cool storytelling vibe to it, with always a really sweet, twisted ending, and then he's out. I love the way he's just boom, and it's over.
Yeah.
So you might enjoy that one.
Dude, that's awesome. Mike Rowe is, you want to talk about just humble guy, humble beginnings. His story is just incredible, but super encouraging. Yeah. So I'll have to take a look at that.
He's doing a ton for the industry in a sense of trying to generate buzz around our workforce development issues too. I've seen him on This Old House, sort of interfacing with the tradesmen, but really he's there to pitch, you can do this too.
Yeah.
So he's kudos to him. All right, one big thing, man. Let's wrap it. How you going to do this for us?
Man, as I was thinking about it, I was well, even just as we were talking, I don't know that I have one big thing, but more certain things for certain listeners maybe on the young adult front. So I'm 32-ish, that age demographic on the faith side of it. Man, if you have questions about faith, if you have just doubts or things that are either rocking you in this season of life or have rocked you in different seasons, just finding and engaging with someone about those questions. I'll solicit myself, but that age is just hard, and there's a lot of hard life that gets covered up by a lot of the things of life that aren't the most sustainable. And so that's my one big thing for that is hey, if you're in this age group and you don't have a faith or wouldn't say that that's something that's influential in your life, would highly encourage you to engage with someone who you have seen embody some of those things and characteristics that you're interested in wanting to know more of. And then maybe the more global big thing is just man, relationships matter. And I know we've kind of hit on that in a lot of ways through different topics and conversations here, but it's funny. I've been thinking about, I've heard a lot of people say first impressions matter, which totally do, right? We've all probably heard it in a lot of different ways through starting new things or meeting someone for the first time. But it was funny. My wife and I were talking about this the other day of like, hey, what about the back end? Like, what about like last impressions? And it kind of got me thinking. I was like, this is good TED Talk topic. Like, what about the last impression you make with someone, and how important is that? And I just think it may get lost in a little bit of the nuance of like, hey, it's always the first impression. That's the most important. Hopefully we're not making a lot of like last impressions with people, right? I mean, maybe if you're moving on to something different or moving across the country or moving somewhere that you may not interact with someone as much. But I think what's just been on my mind recently is just the importance of a last impression that you make on someone and how that can be equally as impactful if you're in a situation where you would leave a last impression. And I think that boils over to relationships, whether friends or family, or, hey, remembering back to a last impression you made on someone. And maybe it's not the last impression, right? Maybe it's the impression that leads to more down the road or more interactions and ways. But I don't know. That's just been something that's like really stuck with me these last few months. It's just, what about that? You know, no one ever really talks about that as much. And maybe it's because we don't leave very many last impressions with people, but we all do in different ways and seasons of life. And just something to like think through and consider.
Yeah. Finish strong, end well.
Yeah.
Love it, man. Well, thank Grant, dude. Thanks for hanging out with us,
Dude,
man.
it's so fun.
This is like...
It's surreal to be in here. I mean, I told you guys before we started, but like the things you all are doing, it's so fun. And the ways that you guys are using your gifts to serve others and love others well, like stories matter. And the ways in which you guys are using your gifts to share those stories is incredible and incredibly impactful for people, whether you hear it from them or not. And it's not all just about listen counts and how many people are tuning in. Like, you guys know that. But the way in which you're doing it is super fun, and just feel really grateful to have been a part of it.